r/MaliciousCompliance. Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut. Okay, I'll take the firing. Story 1. I worked for the company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years, and there were two main parts to the job. The first part was the sales side of things. This was away from the office and the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving and on a couple of occasions flying abroad to work face-to-face with the customers to deliver a high-quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product, and I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I constantly got rave reviews from customers for my style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. Now, the second part was the office side, and this was my weaker side, I guess. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was fine. But I wasn't great at making the calls. This was the only real, not great part of my job. So in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared a product, designed new products, trained new staff members, ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees whenever I could. I liked the owner and I liked the manager. I liked all the staff who were around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and took pride in. The company had been doing well, so the owner had slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for the company. I had joined about 3 months after he started, so I'd been part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I was loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. And at one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary, not massive, but I was happy. Then the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was, and he told me he would love for me to remain his employee, but I would need to work from a different office. This either required me to move or to quadruple, at a minimum, my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office, but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was just another employee and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed that she was the new owner, everyone was pretty surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes too. The manager left to start her own business since the new owner was going to be the manager. A lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anyone who had got to a decent level was let go. Since almost everyone was on a 0-hour contract, she was able to do this. Whilst technically it was a new company for the customers, it was the same old business. The company still had the same trading name, and the only real difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who had been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience working with in the past. I was open and honest with the owner, and I let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, whilst my girlfriend could only work during school holidays, worked in a school. The owner gave them both interviews and then hired them since we needed the staff.
Hey there. If you haven't heard already, a few friends and I recently launched Rufus Rugs, your go-to destination for premium custom hand-tufted rugs. Looking to add a touch of your favorite anime like Naruto to your space? We've got you covered. Or perhaps you're a die-hard Pokemon guy and want bus toys showcased for everyone to admire. No matter your style, we can bring your vision to life. Click the first link in the description to explore more.
Over the next 2 years, business started to fall. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices while decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, this wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But old customers who had been with us for 10 plus years immediately noticed. They were being charged more and were receiving less or worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased prices again. 95% of our old customers left us. New customers rarely became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. Whilst all this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized that the minimum wage they were being paid wasn't worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly wage for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit, my friend remained but was looking for something new. Then I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was kind of unexpected. I had just finished working on the location with a customer. My next customer was in 2.5 hours, and it was a half-hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both locations. If I drove back to the office, I would have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving again. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare around the second location, so I intended to get there as early as possible to find parking, then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office. So I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of a disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple of days. I could bring a witness along if I so desired. Now this was surprising. I was the best employee. I read through her list of complaints about my performance and started working on my defense. At the meeting, I declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio of the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, this is legal and I didn't need consent. The boss's witness was her friend who she had met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who had been there long before the takeover. Every point she raised, I could counter. They ranged from the week. You were unavailable to work for a week in August. I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday. To the pathetic, you were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know? I don't know. I do. Here's a receipt from the garage dated May 12th. To the downright lies. This I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way I was delivering a product to a customer. I hadn't broken health and safety laws. I knew exactly what I was doing since, as I mentioned earlier, I'd been doing this for 14 years at this point. She'd witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee my current salary. I had two choices. I either sign a 0 hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks' notice. I countered that she could give me 12 weeks' notice since my contract guaranteed 1 week's notice for every year of employment up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I had only been her employee for 2 years since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that with how the business takeover had run, it counts as continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up, and she asked for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that since she was firing me from gross misconduct, she didn't have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0 hours contract, I could do that today. But if I didn't, then she would have to fire me. But because she was nice, she would give me 2 weeks' notice. I asked for a couple of hours to go home and think about this. She allowed this. I knew the reason she wanted me to remain for at least 2 weeks was that one of our few remaining bigger customers was set to have a product delivery from me at the time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff to their place on several occasions, and each time there had been problems. It wasn't the staff's fault, it was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer which needed to be perfect. As a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of a 0 hours contract and said I would be leaving. She then said she was giving me my 2 weeks' notice. I declined her offer of 2 weeks' notice. I informed her that if I was being fired for gross misconduct, then surely I cannot be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it would be best for everyone involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and said that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what was best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering your product to your customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, then I would work my 12 weeks' notice. Those were her options, 0 weeks or 12. She chose 12. And for those 12 weeks, I worked the same way I had for 14 years. I didn't coast, I didn't slack, I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to train new staff. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe her lies. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was pretty petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. And most petty of all, she paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day, except me. I was asked to work my day off to answer the phones whilst everyone else was being pampered. Nobody knew I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa, and I wasn't there. Here's the thing. I'm a big, fat, bearded dude. I have no interest in a spa day. If she had offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. And for those last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over for me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came around. The owner had nothing planned, not so much as a card after 14 years, 2 for her. The office assistant manager who had become a friend had got me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend who I had been training to replace me quit. He was on a 0-hours contract, so required no notice. He was unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my previously salary job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned of it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work to let me know. The second was the owner receiving a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for constructive dismissal and unfair dismissal. I had arranged this with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims of constructive unfair dismissal, said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with more reasons for firing me, but the truth was that the company was making less money because of her business practices and I was the highest and only salaried person there. I had evidence that I was a great employee, and I had evidence that she asked me to move to a 0-hours contract. She initially tried to deny this since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay. But once my lawyer provided hers with a transcript of the entire meeting along with a copy of the recording, she knew she was screwed. Still, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped that the legal fees would lead me to dropping the case. Little did she know my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis whilst hers wasn't. She ended up settling out of court. The aftermath: the office assistant who had become a friend quit a couple of months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently, the owner was telling them that I just quit. I informed them that I had been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went so far as to offer me a part-time job and to pay for me to attend college to earn a degree required for them to hire me full-time. Now, this was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who were a bit too far away to commute to, and I wasn't ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over. Currently earning more than I was, working fewer hours, and for better owners too. The business now, her business, is floundering. COVID left the new owner desperate for cash. She canceled orders but refused to refund customers' money, citing an act of God clause in the contracts. The business's Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most of the staff have left, and the business is still afloat, but barely. Story 2. Our malicious compliance. Ruin a department I helped create? Fine. Whatever. Now, this goes back decades. I'm almost over it. Not really. I joined a company that was set up as a consultancy to a large corporation to repair their relationship with the local community that they were a part of. I was in the IT division. I was part of a team of 5 people who installed computers in local businesses and ran a billing package for these businesses. We trained their staff and supported everything. This was all done as a low-cost outreach and was very successful. This went fine for about 8 years until the top guy in the company left to join the corporation and a new guy took his place as director. The new guy, who wasn't really a problem, was more of a paper manager. A genius at it really, but he left all personnel issues to the department managers. However, he didn't go along with the IT manager and she finally resigned after months of tense standoffs over various policy issues. Now, I was the most experienced staffer and I might have had a chance to get her job, but the office grapevine said the director had already secretly selected someone himself. This was surprising as we'd merged with a large corporation and all hiring was required to go through human resources. But he wanted to be able to replace our manager instantly, so he'd be grooming the replacement so the moment she resigned, in a fit of anger during a meeting, he had replaced her right away. Remember how I said the director wasn't good at personnel? He wasn't good at hiring and interviewing either. The new IT manager was horrifically unqualified. Her resume was invented from top to bottom. She had no management experience, and as we discovered, she knew nothing about IT. How much of nothing? She didn't understand the difference between Macs and PCs. She made a major purchase of new Office software for the entire office, Mac Office software, reran MS-DOS and PCs at the same time. Although Windows 95 had come out a few years earlier, we were locked into IBM PCs with DOS-based applications on a contract with IBM. Her resume boasted a deep programming background, but she didn't know what a subroutine was. It simply just got worse and worse. Over the next few years, she deliberately drove out all experienced staff. She would require highly granular timekeeping for all of IT, tracking who called in for support and when we sent support at a business or the corporation, even though there was zero use for this as there wasn't even internal tracking for who used what. When we complied, including tracking the time to track the time, and her increasingly complex needs for details started to take up an hour each day, the director ended it. She also routinely took personal credit for projects done by her department with no acknowledgement of the actual individual who performed the actual work. One by one, my coworkers left for other jobs, and in one case, she framed one guy for failure she caused and got permission to fire him. She replaced everyone with people she had known at previous jobs, regardless of their backgrounds and job skills. A COBOL programmer replaced one of our training and support people. He was a great guy and miserable in the role she put him in. She hired another woman to replace another staff member, but all this woman had done before was author training manuals. Our training manuals were all provided under our contract. I never figured out what she did aside from acting occasionally as a personal secretary, which made no sense since we had a secretarial pool and she got paid 3 times what they got paid. As for me, my wife and I had our first child around this time, and I simply just didn't care about issues of pride anymore. I was careful because all I wanted to do was bring home a paycheck for my family. The IT manager took credit for everything I did. I was careful to document my work, and in many cases, her taking credit failed because it was too obvious she wasn't involved. She moved on, trying to get me fired. Anyone who has done customer or customer computer support knows that you will get customers you just cannot make happy. Usually just a personality conflict, and in the past, we simply traded the call off to another member of IT staff, and that would often do the trick. My manager tried to inflate all of these into fireable offenses. To my face, she promised to have my back, as the original IT manager always did. She loved her staff and would take a bullet for us. But behind the scenes, she tried to build a case against me. The first time I realized this was a meeting between the director, one of our business consultants, my manager, and myself. I'd been given a heads up by the business consultant, and when I walked into the meeting, I had all my notes on my supposed failures. She made her pitch to the director, but the business consultant and I destroyed her and demonstrated to the director she was just inventing things. She was humiliated, and I remained unscathed. The second time, an assistant manager at one of the businesses I'd recently installed a computer system raised a huge stink. He'd been following me around during the installation and questioned me. Turns out he was trying to set up a system at home to call into his office to get onto the network, which, back then, was a bigger deal than it is today. However, I'd actually done this for another business, but not this one. He'd made some random guesses as to what he needed and wasted $5,000 because it was all IBM hardware and software. He blamed me. Again, the IT manager told me she'd reviewed my notes and knew I was blameless. I wasn't stupid enough to believe her again. I got the business consultant to go to the head manager at this business and ask about this. It turned out the assistant manager there had never requested remote access internally, and the entire staff there supported my version of events. Of course, my manager once again tried to escalate this to a major failure. Remember those detailed notes and timekeeping she had wanted? Well, even though the ridiculous depth of them was gone, I still kept them. She called another meeting, this time inviting senior management from the corporation as well. It was another embarrassing moment for her. I refuted all the claims made by her and the assistant manager of the business with documentation. My good friend, our business consultant, backed it all up, and the cherry on top, the head manager of the business called the senior management at our corporation to apologize to his assistant manager and to praise my work. My manager looked like the idiot she was, all because I continued to comply with the task and timekeeping she originally instituted to drive the old staff out. Now, she kept her job mainly because our director would have to explain why he had hired someone so clearly unqualified, and he couldn't do that because he violated HR policy to do so. But I know you readers out there want to hear some juicy revenge as well. So that weekend, following that meeting, a major business's entire computer network I'd installed went down after a lightning strike. I remotely diagnosed it and knew it needed a simple hard drive replacement and a restore from a tape backup. I came Monday, and before I could leave to fix the client, she called me into her office. She offered me a 3-month severance package, full pay, benefits, etc. They only offered these to management types normally. She hated me and wanted me gone. I told her I would gladly accept it, but didn't she want this client fixed first? It was kind of a big deal. She said no. While I signed the legal paperwork, she rambled idiotically about my job performance, etc. But I just finished signing, took my copy of the papers, and told her that she didn't know anything about what she was talking about, and this severance proved that. I packed up my office and said goodbye to my friends, many of whom were shocked and crying over this, and I can't deny I was a little wet around the eyes too. I told them it wasn't a problem. And you know what? It wasn't a problem. I'd been building my own software company on the nights and weekends for years with the full permission of my original manager. I walked out of there with 3 months of free salary into my own company, which was now paying me more than my old salary now, that I could go full-time with my partners. Oh, and my friend who got fired? I used my contacts and found him a job, a better job too. As for my manager, it took over 2 months to figure out how to replace and restore that hard drive to the business that had the lightning strike. I wasn't kidding about her hiring the wrong people for our jobs too. That business likely badmouthed them because they barely retained 25 to 30% of the businesses as they lost them one by one over the next few years. My friends kept me up to date until they too left.